Welcome to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth, and we're here to preserve and promote culture in this benighted age, one weekly conversation at a time. You can find and subscribe to this podcast via Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, and a whole bunch of other venues. Just visit our site, vmspod.com, to find more information, as well as our RSS feed, which you can plug into any podcatcher so you never miss an episode of the Virtual Memories Show. You can also follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and YouTube, where I go by vmspod, and subscribe to my semi-weekly newsletter at buttondown.com/vmspod. Well, I am in rainy, windy Frankfurt for a pharma trade show. I thought about getting this episode ready before I left on Sunday night, but there was just way too much going on for me to focus on that. So I got to spend a bleary, jet-lagged evening last night editing this one, and then conked out for good at 8:30 at night, waking up at 7 a.m. Woke up a few times during the night, but 7 was the when the neighbors came walking by and woke me. The upside is I apparently had one of those monkey's paw wish moments where I really was bummed out that I wasn't going to get to see any of the World Series this time around, especially since I'm 5 hours ahead from Eastern time here in Frankfurt. But I got up this morning and discovered that the Jays-Dodgers game was in the 16th inning. So down in breakfast, I managed to follow that through the 18th inning bitter end. Go baseball. But after the show ends on Thursday, I'll be hopping a flight to London, where I hope to record with some folks and spend time hanging out with other pals. And if there's time, maybe I'll go see some art. The good thing about Frankfurt is there's not a lot to do here besides the trade show, so at least I'll get to rest in the evenings. Anyway, let's get to this week's show. My guest is, we'll say, comics journalist, and just comics artist, Josh Neufeld. I've been meaning to connect with Josh for years now. I owned a copy of A.D. New Orleans After the Deluge, which came out from Pantheon, for years and years and years. Read that a bunch of years ago, I think even before I started doing the podcast. But last winter, while I was giving a ride to Red Hook to Fred Kaplan and his wife, Brooke Gladstone, she mentioned working with Josh on her book, The Influencing Machine, and that kind of put him back on my pod radar. Of course, as usual, it took last week's guest, Dean Haspiel, a great friend of Josh's, to nudge me and say, hey, Josh is coming with me to Small Press Expo this year. You ought to record with him, which is not what Dean sounds like at all. But that is what happened. So Josh was debuting a new zine, Beyond AD, 20 Years After the Deluge, at SPX. It's a sort of DVD commentary, as he puts it, on his best-selling book, AD. AD reported on the lives of 5 people whose lives were upended by Hurricane Katrina. And it's a phenomenal book. Beyond AD is sort of a follow-up that mixes comics, photography, interviews, and other text pieces to continue their stories. Now, AD was an amazing piece of, I don't know, you want to say journalism, nonfiction, reportage, whatever, in comics form, which, we talk about how some of the participants in it were concerned about seeing their lives turned into, quote unquote, a comic book. But the new zine it's a welcome coda to it. Even as the 20th anniversary of Katrina passed by without, there was momentary, but not too much acknowledgement of just the massive systemic failure that made the storm so much worse than it should have been. And I talk about my side of the Louisiana and New Orleans experience as part of this stuff. But anyway, Josh is a fantastic comics artist with just a tremendous storytelling tool set. Like, he knows what works to tell the story in comics from, moment to moment. And I love seeing how he used it in AD, and then how that developed over the course of more of his nonfiction comics work. So all of this is to say, if you haven't read it yet, go order A.D. New Orleans After the Deluge. It's from Pantheon. It's in bookstores everywhere. It's on bookshop.com, blah, blah, blah. And then check out Beyond A.D., the zine, which is available at joshcomics.com. Comics is with an X at the end instead of a CS. When you're there, you'll also find a ton of Josh's other comics work and illustration and other stuff. So if you have not read Josh Neufeld's work yet, do yourself a favor and visit joshcomics.com and start reading him. Also, as mentioned, this was recorded at Small Press Expo, or SPX. That was September 2025. So there's a lot of references to the show, and this is also right after the 20th anniversary of Katrina. Now, here's Josh's first-person bio from his site. There's a more extensive FAQ page there, which is really good. Josh writes, I am a cartoonist who works primarily in the field of nonfiction comics, specifically as a comics journalist. I'm the writer of the Eisner and Harvey Award-nominated A.D., New Orleans After the Deluge, and the Zurich Award-winning graphic travelogue, A Few Perfect Hours, and other stories from Southeast Asia and Central Europe. I am the illustrator of the New York Times bestseller, The Influencing Machine, Brooke Gladstone on the Media. I was a longtime artist for Harvey P. Carr's American Splendor, and my art has been exhibited in gallery and museum shows in the United States and Europe. And now, the Virtual Memories conversation with Josh Neufeld. So 20 years. 20 years since the storm. Mm-hmm. And we'll say a 20-year anniversary for the book, although it's the book comes after.
Yeah, the book came out 4 years after, but I was working on the web comic version of it.
Yeah.
Within a year and a half after the storm, I would say. So feels like 20 years.
Where'd the project originate for you? You mentioned working as a relief worker around Katrina in Biloxi, but tell me about the impetus, where it all began for you, and sort of how the project evolved and what it's like to follow it up now.
Yeah. So when the hurricane happened, I was watching on the news like everybody else, like horrified by not only, the damage that the storm had done, but really what happened
governmental
afterwards.
Aftermath.
Yeah. I mean, the overtopping and the breaking of the levees, and then the just abandonment of all these people on freeway overpasses and in their roofs and outside these shelters of last resort, the Superdome and the Convention Center, and just stunned at that there was apparently no plan to help these people and to evacuate them and to rescue them. And it just was really mind-blowing and devastating. And I was like, what, are we in a third world country? Or apparently, certain classes of people are treated as if they were lesser citizens and not worthy of government help. So that was really, really profound, and led to a lot of soul searching, and eventually led to me and my wife volunteering with the Red Cross locally in New York, because there were a bunch of people, evacuees, who were finally starting to make it up to New York, who had finally been rescued and put on buses. They didn't even know where they were going to end up. And so we were helping them navigate like these debit cards that they'd been given. And
I remember FEMA was issuing
They were issuing them things, but their website was constantly down, and a lot of folks didn't have experience with computers. And so I was doing stuff like that along with my wife and collecting clothing donations and stuff. And eventually I just decided I wanted to get more involved, and I wanted to really do something if I could. So I got training. I pursued training as an emergency response, soldier, whatever, for lack of a better term. And there were like a couple of weeks of training, and they kind of kept discouraging you that, do you really want to do this? Why do you want to do this? They really wanted to make sure they were getting people who were really committed to it. Yeah. And I kept passing through those checkpoints, and I finally got that certification. And almost as soon as I got the certification, I was deployed, and I could have been sent pretty much anywhere in the country, because there were also people who needed help in North Dakota and in Minnesota and other places. And also where Houston, people were being evacuated all over the place, and there are also other, emergencies and things that happened. But it turned out I got deployed to Biloxi, Mississippi, about 90 miles outside of New Orleans. And I ended up working on the back of an emergency response vehicle there for 3 weeks, feeding people in this one neighborhood of Biloxi that had been really devastated by the storm, like right on the coast. And the storm surge there had just like wiped the whole area clean, It wasn't a governmental failure there. It was
just a natural disaster.
30-foot storm surge. And people were kind of trickling back into their homes and trying to rebuild. And a lot of them, they didn't have working utilities, or any kind of ability to cook for themselves or even refrigerators to hold food. So we were this useful, the Red Cross was a useful tool that came through, or a resource to enable people to have lunches and dinners. So we would bring these hot containers filled with hot lunches and hot dinners, and we'd distribute them out of the back of the truck, and we'd drive through the neighborhoods, and people would come up, and it was a really amazing experience. It was for me, it was really eye-opening about what life was really like in the South. For I think a lot of those folks, after they got to know me, because we would come through the same places and see the same people, it was like their first time meeting someone from the North, or from Brooklyn.
Northeasterner, as we always say.
A Yankee. A lot of them had a lot of funny ideas about what life was like in New York, and I'm sure I had some wrong ideas about life in the South. My
wife's family is from rural Louisiana, about 45 minutes west and south of New Orleans. So being the Yankee suitor for their daughter was... I can imagine
you've had those questions and conversations yourself.
Yeah.
So it was great, and it was also really profound to be in that area, to be amongst those people and to hear the stories and stories about other neighbors of theirs and people who hadn't survived and all of that kind of stuff. And at the same time I was doing that, I was also blogging. Mm-hmm. There used to be this thing called blogs that people did, and people
that's where virtual memories started. I turned it into a podcast about 13 years ago, but it was just me typing away.
So back then in 2005, the blogosphere was very active. A lot of people were reading my posts, and it was on LiveJournal, and people were responding in real time. Other people who had worked as relief volunteers, other people who'd been in the hurricane, people in New Orleans, and it was a really active discussion. It was really interesting. I wrote a lot about things I saw. We also one day got the opportunity to visit New Orleans right after the water had been pumped out, and drove around the city. It was totally abandoned, totally ghost town.
Yeah, we were there 6 weeks after. We had booked our wedding venue a few weeks before the storm. For 6 months after the storm. We got married in March of 2006. And one thing I give you credit for in AD is what it was like in that couple of weeks after.
Yeah.
Because it was gray. Mm-hmm. Everything, there was just that layer of dust and grime covering everything. And it was just, this city's kind of empty. You also capture the thing that struck me at the beginning when we first drove into the city itself, which was the missing part of the Superdome roof. Mm-hmm. You show it being ripped off, and I've never known where that landed.
That's a good question.
It was just coming in. I'm like,
maybe in Mississippi.
Huge shard of metal had to go somewhere. But it was trying to encompass what that devastation was and what it's like in the aftermath of it. Mm-hmm. So I couldn't imagine.
Well, comics can be good for that kind of stuff.
You got it really well. Actually, what's it like revisiting? I'm sorry to cut you off from actually getting back to New Orleans that first time.
It can go on forever. So,
but the impetus to make a piece of comics journalism about it, working with a bunch of the survivors, people who made it through.
Yeah.
A, what was the impetus for that? And B, what's it like revisiting that with the 20th anniversary here?
To make a long story short, all those blog posts, I ended up collecting them into a zine called Katrina Came Calling. And I just wanted to, basically I printed it up myself. I had a friend who was a printer who helped me do that. And then I distributed them to everybody who was in the zine, like anyone on LiveJournal who had contributed. There were a lot of people who were kind of repeat contributors. So I tracked down everybody I could, if they gave me their address, then I would send them a copy of the zine on me, no charge. But then I think I also sent it out or told people about it, and I sold some copies on my website. And then Whitney Matheson, who had a blog called Pop Candy on USA Today, she wrote about it. And all of a sudden, like, it got really big, and I got all these orders from all over the country, and I had to go back to press and actually charge people for it. And it was a good problem to have, but it was kind of like not something I was prepared for. And it was also weird for me because I'd never really made a zine. I'd only made mini comics and comics. Yeah. And here was this prose piece with a lot of photos, but no comics. I had no plan to make comics out of this whole experience. But lo and behold, the zine got into the hands of Jeff Newell, the comics editor at Smith Magazine, and the editor there, Larry Smith. So Jeff and Larry decided that they wanted me to make a comic about New Orleans and Hurricane Katrina. And so the idea actually came from somebody else. And they had a small budget, and they had previously done Shooting War with Dan Goldman and Anthony Lappe, I think his name was. And that book they'd run it as a web comic. It had done very well. It had got a book deal. And so they pitched to me, well, you can do this similar thing. We can't pay you a ton, but could quite possibly be a book deal at the end of it. And that sounded like an exciting idea for me. And I was really excited I had been thinking, can I do something related to this experience in comics? But at that point, I had really only done autobiographical comics. I dipped a little bit of a toe into doing journalism, but I had worked as an illustrator for Harvey Pekar on American Splendor, and I had done my own book of travel stories, travel comics, called A Few Perfect Hours, that I won a Xeric grant for a couple years earlier. But I wanted to kind of move into the next thing, telling other people's stories. Yeah. So everything sort of dovetailed to work out. And then Larry and I talked a lot about, like, okay, if we're going to do this story about New Orleans and Katrina, it obviously has to cover, somebody who was at the Superdome or at the convention center, and the misinformation, about all of the supposed violence and craziness that went on there. And the other threads that I really needed to cover was someone who had survived the flooding, because that was just like a recurring vision of mine and obsession in a weird, probably not very healthy way, thinking about what that would be like.
We were all, it was I have a family or in-laws, future in-laws in Louisiana, but I feel like that was a psyche thing in America. That, we could not help but sympathize with people having to use a hatchet to get through the ceiling to get out on the roof.
Nightmarish. Yeah. And I feel like we all, Jung probably wrote about, there's like nightmares of being swallowed up by water, right? Yeah. It's so primal. And there had been that, if you remember, there had been that tsunami, that Southeast Asian tsunami a couple of years before that. People. Yeah. And there had been a lot of video circulating around that showed those inundations of water. So it just was like this thing I couldn't get out of my head. Plus, and I realized this since, having been in New York on 9/11 and having witnessed the tragedy and been unable to do anything about it except kind of respond with my art, was something that I was still carrying with me, that I think gave me even more empathy with the people who had lived through this disaster, through this, total epic failure of a civilian infrastructure in their own city. So all of those things were kind of in my head. And so Larry and I decided we would find like a selection of people, a cross-section of New Orleanians who kind of represented some of these various stories. And then through various ways, we found these people, we contacted them. I heard someone on a radio program. I read about someone else in my alumni magazine. I knew someone else was my friend was she had a cousin who was the wife of one of the other guys, it was that kind of thing. And once we found these people, approached them, told them what the project was, kind of cleared the hurdles of them kind of comprehending what this meant and what comics about.
It's a comic, but it's not.
Exactly. Yeah. Denise, one of the characters in particular, was definitely a little bit of a hurdle for her to believe that this would not be a humorous treatment of her horrific experiences. Right. So, but, we squared all that away. It probably took 4 or 5 months of finding people, identifying them, going down there. Larry and I went down and did like initial interviews with folks, and just sort of saying like, we can do this. And me also kind of thinking, how can I tell this story? How can I weave these stories together? I've never done a project like this. But knowing that it was going to be serialized monthly and that I could kind of do it by the seat of my pants, but slowly build it up, was a really exciting idea. And it was Web 2.0. And, there was also a lot of feedback that came every time we posted a new chapter, and we would crowdsource fact checking, etc. It was really exciting. And we even embedded like videos into some of the panels as we were doing it. And it was a really fulfilling thing as a artist, as a journalist, to feel I was carrying these people's stories, I was representing them, I was bringing them out there. They were trusting me, and then they were feeling like I was giving them a voice, And so the book kind of built that way as a webcomic, and one thing led to another, and then it became Pantheon bought it, and I expanded it, and it became a book, and that was 2007, 8, and 9, really. Like there's not that was pretty much, other than my young daughter being born and us my wife and I trying to manage an infant and a young child, and then also building this book, having this baby of a book at the same time. That was pretty much all that was happening in those 3 years.
But again, you yielded something amazing. Did you have it? I mean, you mentioned doing nonfiction, but any journalistic background previously? I
mean, I always have been engaged with the real world, let's say.
But reporting's different than being truthful, I guess. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I've always been a follower of journalism, and I had a New York Times subscription when I was in college, and I read a number of different magazines, and I worked for The Nation magazine when I got out of college, but not on the editorial side. But it was because I was so interested in that form of storytelling, of nonfiction storytelling. But the closest I had done to comics journalism was a sort of humorous little one-shot called Titans of Finance that I did with a financial writer named Rob Walker. And those were like these satirical stories of financial miscreants, but it was all factual, But he did all the work. He did all the reporting, and I just was the illustrator. Yeah. I was just the illustrator.
I know. Eddie Campbell would kick my nuts for saying that. They're just as important as they are the writer, in a sense. Yeah.
Well, for a journalistic project, I give all credit to Rob. But no, I'd written some film reviews, back in the day for like some low-level indie newspapers and things like that. But in terms of being a journalist, this was the baby steps. But I give a lot of credit to Larry Smith, the editor, who sort of led the way when we first did the reporting. And I kind of paid close attention to the way that he asked questions and, did follow-ups and all that sort of stuff. And I guess I just was a fast learner, because after that initial trip with Larry, I just took over and was the reporter / writer / artist for AD. And, I'm not a gotcha journalist. I'm not a journalist who's trying to catch someone in a misrepresentation or a lie. Also, I was asked this recently up in down in Baton Rouge, why didn't I have, interview someone from FEMA, or have someone in the book who was from the military, or on the other hand, why not someone who suffered even more, like who had someone die, or, first of all, I really wanted it to be a people's history, like just regular people from different walks of life who this thing happened to them, because that is something that I could relate to as a regular person. And I feel like there were so many other stories of FEMA and and General Honoré and all this and all that this was just one other story of Hurricane Katrina. It's not the definitive book. Yeah. So
to me, those would be the information dump talking head pieces.
Exactly.
Because those are guys who are going to explain the details of this, and this, and this that happened, as opposed to showing the living and what they actually went through. Yeah.
Exactly. And that was a big part of the book for me, was almost like a formalistic exercise, like breaking out of my normal way of making comics, which is where I would do a lot of explaining and setting up scenes. And this was like no voiceover, no explanatory stuff. Everything you're going to read in the book up until the last section is just seen through character action and dialogue. That's it. And that was a great constraint for me and very freeing as a storyteller. I wish I could have more projects that lent themselves to that kind of treatment. The book really just... It just was good fortune, I think, that we found the people that we did, and that the book is what it is. And people ask me, would you have changed this or that? What's the deal with those weird colors? Would you have chosen to do something different? And sure, now, you can say that, but it is what it is. Yeah. I'm not George Lucas. I'm not going to go back and tinker and make it worse than it was before. I didn't realize at the time. Is this a Dean
thing where we have to fight over Phantom Menace or something? I'm just kidding.
If you want to, I'm willing to do that. You can do that as an extra.
For the Patreon followers, all three of them.
There you go. No, I'm very... I still look back and I'm amazed that book is now part of my, the library of works that I've created, because I certainly at the time didn't have any...
I could imagine this wasn't the goal. It's something you're incredibly proud of, but not, I'm going to go into this, so I got this book.
Exactly. No, I don't have that kind of hubris or even ideas of the future.
But revisiting some of the subjects in subsequent years, you have a zine coming out here at SPX about... as you put it, the DVD extras of the book. Can you talk about...
If people know about blogs, they might also know about DVDs.
Remember, we once had those, too. I got a Blu-ray player a year or two ago with the, I should finally do this and get some physical media again. I've got tons of old CDs on one side. But yes, getting back to the... commentary tracks. The extra stuff is always good.
Those were so great. I love those.
Although my wife got from the library, she got the DVD of The Mummy, the Brendan Fraser thing, because apparently... his commentary track on that is gold. So I had to figure out how to rip it and get the Brendan Fraser commentary. To hear him just sitting in the theater goofing on the movie that he's starring in and making his career. But
wasn't the Coen brothers Blood Simple? Didn't they have a fake commentary track on it? That's by this
know.
I believe there's a fake British.
Well, it's probably Roderick James, because when they put out the it was screenplays to two movies of theirs, one of which is my favorite of all time, Miller's Crossing.
Okay.
They have an introduction by their film editor, Roderick James, who's completely fictional.
Okay.
And in
fact, he British?
He's supposed to be British. That's exactly.
That must be him.
But it's actually the two of them, writing this. Because they made up this fictional editor for union reasons. But that was also the idea that they had him do a commentary.
He did a commentary for the entire film, and I think everything in there's a lie.
Yeah, it would have to be. But I was glad when they controlled that much of their universe.
So much, yeah.
But
so I get asked a lot by people. Are you still in touch with the people from the book? And it's a logical question, because they're so immersively part of the story, and it becomes clear that I knew them in that way and for such a long time. But I think a lot of journalists get this question, and the fact is that as a journalist, it is an immersive experience while you're working on a story. And then you go to your next story, and you have to kind of do that same thing with the next group of people that you're profiling. So unfortunately, I wasn't able to, continue that same level of intimacy with the characters in the years following AD. But then some of them I kept in touch with, various social media and all that. And then 10 years after the storm, so back in 2015, I thought, it would be really interesting to sort of catch up with them. And I kind of had a vague idea of what they were doing and where they were at. So I did a piece at that point where I re-interviewed and got back in touch with them. Unfortunately, Denise, who had a lot of issues, that she was struggling with during and after the storm, she chose not to be part of that group. But I interviewed, 4 of the other characters, and it was really interesting to catch up with them and get their perspective on the city and on the anniversary. And Kwame, in particular, the high school student, was now a grown man, had a child of his own, was like a totally different person, was much more able to answer, interested in answering my questions in more than single syllables, and being much more thoughtful, So it was really great. It was like a coup for me, because to be fair, he'd been a little bit of a frustrating interview back when I did the book originally, not because of any, attitude or anything he had. He was like a good kid. Yeah. And so he didn't want to ever say anything that might have put like his parents in a negative light, or reflected that there had been discord within the family, or that he felt that he was having, that things weren't fair for him. He was so like thoughtful about everyone else. But as a journalist, as I'm sure you know, that can be really frustrating if you don't get good stuff from people, So anyway, it was really interesting and wonderful to catch up with folks and to sort of see how they changed. And like a couple of the characters had gone gray or white haired, and that was really interesting. And they both owned it, really proudly in a sense. And in the years since, in Beyond AD, I talk about there's a cosmic coincidence that has to do with Abbas Hamid's store that I can, if you're interested, you can find out about it in the zine. Unfortunately, one of the characters, Hamid, did pass away. So life goes on, or it doesn't go on, I guess.
Do you get down to New Orleans at all?
I have not been back to New Orleans in more than a decade. Yeah. The closest I got was just last weekend when I was in Baton Rouge for 3 or 4 days visiting a school.
My wife went to LSU, and she keeps telling me we have to go sometime during college football season so we can actually see a Tigers game. But
I saw Mike the Tiger, but it was in between games.
Gotcha. So we only go down around the holidays and go see her family. So it's one of those, we should go down sometime in the fall.
I really want to get... A lot of people were like just horrified that I had not been to New Orleans and hadn't even been during Carnival season or Jazz Fest or any of like the good times.
The times to be there.
I'm only there when people are sad and
It's a single project, and you've had a career around it otherwise. So,
exactly.
I'll ask, about the... work you did. Well, I mentioned before we started with Brooke Gladstone and other people you've worked with, but in general, you mentioned the working with Rob Walker and being quote unquote the illustrator.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little about the dynamic, the tension, whatever you want to call it, of solo work of yours versus, or in concert with collaborative projects?
Oh yeah. First of all, I love collaboration, and it's something that I have been doing since I was in high school, because I grew up on superhero comics. So
assembly line
collaboration, however you want to define it, was something that just was de rigueur, So I grew up thinking that I would be an artist or a penciler, And it was only when I sort of transitioned from superhero comics, from genre comics to indie and alternative and underground comics.
What was your moment? Because I always tell the story when I get to Tulane and the drummer from Texas on my dorm floor said, "Dude, don't read that. You got to read Love and Rockets." And that just... It was
Love and Rockets.
Sent me in that direction. But yeah.
I tried getting into Love and Rockets, and I wasn't quite ready for it yet. Yeah. It was still when I was in college, and I was still reading genre stuff, and it just was a little too weird for me. Yeah. Or I just didn't quite get the sensibility at that point.
I unfortunately started with Flies on the Ceiling, which is one of the most fractured and weird stories that Jaime has ever told to Izzy in Mexico.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, I don't know what I'm reading right now, but yes, this is not the X-Men. Okay, I'm going in another direction here. Yeah.
Well, I do have to say that I later developed a huge passion for the Hernandez brothers.
Yeah, it just takes... We had to hit these things at different times.
Yeah. Palomar is one of my most favorite things ever. Yeah. But it was later. So what was it for me? I think it was... It's a weird thing to say this, but what happened was I met my girlfriend, who became my wife, when we were still just out of college. I was still begrudgingly reading genre stuff, not really enjoying it, but not knowing that there really was anything else out there. And then we decided to quit our jobs and go traveling, go backpacking. And we went on this crazy backpacking adventure where we bought one-way tickets and just kept going further and further. Yeah. And after about a year of that, I had ended up in the Czech Republic. I was at a English language bookstore called the Globe Bookstore, and I found this book called Comic Book Rebels, which had all these interviews with indie folks, including Harvey Pekar and Joyce Brabner, because they were working on My Cancer Year, or Our Cancer Year, and Scott McCloud. They had an early section of Understanding Comics. And I read the entire thing, just like the whole book, all these interviews with all these people. I'm sure Art Spiegelman was in there. I'm sure it was like, here's your introduction to
we'll pretend it's 101, but you're really going into the deep end on this one.
So it just, I wasn't reading any other comics. I'd kind of, reached my limit, and all of a sudden there was like this world that was being laid out for me. And when we came back to the States, we moved back to Chicago, and Quimby's bookstore was just around the corner. And there was another Myopic Books that had like a discount comic section, and I just was voracious, and I just started picking everything up. So probably American Splendor was probably the thing that I felt the most connection to right from the get-go, but also 8-Ball and Hate and Joe Sacco's stuff. Carol Leigh was doing stuff in indie newspapers. I loved her stuff. Julie Doucet, those were kind of the people. And Chris Ware I actually met, like he didn't live too far from me where we were in Chicago. I met him through Rob Walker because they had both gone to University of Texas. And Chris was kind enough to allow me to, come and look at his studio and talk to me about comics. And he was doing Jimmy Corrigan in this indie paper called New City. It was before it moved to the Chicago Reader.
Yeah, I knew it from the Reader. Days. I didn't know it had a previous incarnation. Wow.
And I met Terry Laban there, who was super sweet to me. So it was really an amazing, soft, intro into some really amazing comics that were being made.
The freakiness of being an American Splendor fan who ends up drawing for Harvey Pekar?
It was a very targeted thing. Yeah. Like, I read it, I was reading it, I was loving it. He I was finding all back issues and everything. But the one thing is, I kept thinking in my infinite hubris was, I can draw as good as some of these guys who are drawing for Harvey. I could freaking do this. Yeah. So and there was a particular story. I don't know how well you know the stuff, but like in issue 7 or something, there was a letter that somebody wrote to him that he kind of talked about. He sort of juxtaposed his own life with getting this letter and the person talking to him, and like the illustrator brought to life the person who was writing this letter to him. And then at the very end, or at the beginning of the story, it actually showed his like home address it was like depicted in the comic. And I don't know why that just gave me the idea. I'm just going to write to him and send him some of my stuff and tell him I want to write, I want to illustrate for him. And I sent it off.
Another sucker. I've got another sucker here.
Yeah, I think that is probably what he thought. But I sent it off along with stuff I was also sending to David Greenberger at Duplex Planet was doing stuff at that point. And, I had some idea that I could make some of my own comics. And just sending out things here and there, submitting my stuff various places. And lo and behold, one day the phone rings and it's Harvey Pekar on the other line saying, hey, yeah, let's talk about this. I got your stuff. I think you could draw for me, And it was a long process of that finally happening. It took about a year of us talking back and forth and me shaming him when they came into town to promote Our Cancer Year. And say, yeah, you said you were going to let me draw for you. So there's a little, a little chutzpah on my part for sure. But that was amazing. But it wasn't like, if I had gotten a draw for the Teen Titans when I was 15 or something, that would have felt like, oh my God, I can't believe this actually happened. Yeah. But because Harvey is and his work is so human and down to earth and relatable, and like he's just a regular guy and maybe even more of a screw up than I am, it felt like natural to. It wasn't something where I got so intimidated by the experience that I was paralyzed or something, if you know what I mean. Sure. Like, I was certainly hugely gratified that he saw something in me, and I
but you also believed in your own, with him. You believed in your abilities. Though.
Yeah, and I started to, think that I could write too, and started thinking, write what you know, and doing these autobio comics, and kind of one thing led to another. But I feel like I learned so much by absorbing the way that he went about writing. And I also worked with Joyce Brabner.
Sure.
And she was a very different person to work for, but like equally educational for me. Yeah. And because Harvey was like incredibly easy to work with and never corrected anything or cared particularly if you were using photo reference or things like that. Mm-hmm. Or even if I like emphasized words when I would letter his comic, like gave emphasis to certain words that he
the
hadn't
rhythm
done.
of the speech. Yeah.
But Joyce, on the other hand, was much more persnickety about stuff, and she didn't like it if I added bolds, and she told me why, and I respected that. And she talked a lot about like thinking about the rhythm of panels as like story beats, like thinking in theatrical terms, because she had a background in theater. Yeah. All of this stuff is just going into my young, hungry sponge brain, and helping me think about storytelling too. Because really, in the end, getting back to AD, as much as it's all verbatim reporting and everything that happens is what actually happened to these characters, and if you see a word balloon, it's from a quote of theirs or from their own blog or a reported conversation. It still was something that I thought very much about in a kind of a novelistic way in terms of the structure and the way that certain characters I thought of as sort of the star characters and others more as the supporting actors, and how to balance various storytelling elements and not repeat things and kind of build it up, in a 3-act structure even. So I felt like I was getting all of these lessons on how to write comics, and I was reading books on film. Like David Mamet wrote a great book about film writing.
Was it the Art of the Knife or something like that? I forget. There was a couple that I had.
It's a very slim volume, but it was
small ones I've got in my house.
It's all
somewhere.
about the through line and how every scene has to advance the plot or the character development and basic stuff. I was kind of going to school on my, me and Dean Haspiel, because we were working together a lot at that point with Keyhole Mini Comics and stuff. And we were hungry, and we were taking all these lessons we were getting from the stuff we were reading and from, Tarantino movies or whatever, all these various things, and then trading them back and forth. And it was really exciting. It was a really exciting time. But I think by the time I got to AD, I had learned enough that I felt like I could handle this new, responsibility that I had as a nonfiction storyteller, but still give it that energy that I think a good fiction story has.
Yeah. It works as drama. Knowing that it's nonfiction is
kind
an
of
important overlay, but it's the...
To me, that enhances it, because it's like, holy shit, this really happened to this person,
And, in addition to how you have to structure it and, giving different voices their time, you're also choosing visually...
Yes.
What to represent. You're still making
Absolutely.
this, there's an art beyond just this is what they said. Yeah. This is what they're experiencing. This is how we show it and pace it. That,
And not to be crass, but, there are opportunities for visual dynamism in a book like this that that American Splendor never had. So I could actually go back to my superhero training and think about
you got a city getting
angles.
destroyed.
Yeah, exactly. You can be a little more cosmic in your sort of image conceptions,
because we all have our Kirby moments. That's the in the 2-pager that I'm drawing for Dean's anthology, which you will never forgive me for being this late for. There's still the moment.
I'm in the same shoes as you.
Oh, good. Like I say, I still have to do the lettering and then just scan everything, and I'll just hand it off to him. But there was a moment where I was just trying to figure out just the physical dynamics of showing a dead body lying in bed, seen from the foot of the bed a few feet away. Mm-hmm. And I'm just like, I can't do anything with that foot. I've got this giant foot in the foreground.
Right.
This is
foreshortening.
Yeah, it's not going to work if I do that. Eventually I've realized you don't have to draw what I saw, because this was a nonfiction piece about finding a dead guy.
Oh, wow.
I was like, draw from above and just show the hands that were clenched over the sternum, and that's going to carry
Sometimes
everything.
What you don't show is even more
that was it. I can describe a little of and then I saw the body, but it doesn't have to be Gil's exact angle of seeing the body.
Smart.
And only my second comic after 50 plus years of reading them. It still took
in there.
It takes the moment of how would you actually draw this? It's
right.
literally going through 500 pages of Eddie Campbell's Alec collection, trying to find, I know he drew people in bed at some point. Let me figure out how. Then you realize he's Eddie Campbell. He can get away with a lot of things because he knows how to draw really, really well.
Yeah.
I don't. Let's figure out what's actually going to work dramatically.
Yeah. Work with the tools you have, and that, again, constraints can often lead to greater creativity.
Yeah, I was thinking, I recorded with Matt Madden last year, and of course he takes that in a very
Matt's amazing.
Focused direction with all the I was going to say the Oulipo, but the comics version. Although he said during our interview the great challenge I think Trondheim gave him was to make a comic that does not have any constraints or formal thing to it.
That's the best constraint.
He said, I'm still trying to figure out how to do that.
It's like a Zen koan. You can't figure
it's
that
like, what
out.
if you actually did a comic where you didn't have a constraint and Matt's head explodes and that's
that would always be my problem. That's why I could never write fiction. There's just too many possibilities out there.
You know, because you focus on both nonfiction and journalism, which are two different things, but or at least autobio and journalism. But no thought about fiction, because I'm in the same boat. You know, I just can't.
Yeah.
I can't settle on possibilities.
Yeah.
Fictionally.
So you understand that.
Yeah.
So, absolutely.
Why would a character do this? And then you have this entire panoply of reasons. It's like, well, but if I choose something, that limits everything. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. My wife is a fiction writer, a very accomplished one. She's a published novelist, and she's working on her second novel. And we've always, one of the things that makes our relationship so rewarding, I think, is that we're both these creative people, but in very different forms. But we have this osmosis of, I learned so much from her, and she, I think, has learned from me. And but I admire, this ability that she has to just make up stuff, to just lie blatantly. And I don't. Yeah, it's whenever I come up with anything, it just feels like the most trite thing in the world, and I'm immediately disinterested in my own idea, And I just when I discovered Sacco, when I discovered Pico,
I was assuming Sacco was part of your education for this stuff too.
Yeah. That was like, okay, that's interesting to me. Real people's real stories, and told in this form, which I'd grown up thinking was only for superhero, fantasy, science fiction. Wow, mind-blowing, So I'm continually excited still by that end of the comics universe, and why should I foist my not very good fiction writing, ideas onto a world that already has so many good ones? So, I figure I'm not the greatest journalist in the world. I'm certainly not the greatest artist in the world, but I can combine the two of them pretty okay. So why don't I just stick to the thing that I feel like gets the most out, squeezing the stone.
Use your talent,
Yeah.
Where did the drawing start for you? I don't think we talked about your actual cartooning.
Yeah, before I can even remember.
Yeah.
I mean, my mom says that I was drawing, since I was 4 years old or something. And I was drawing comics from that age. And she would meticulously keep everything that I have. So I have proof that that's true. I have like a Superman that I drew when I was 4, flying in the air. My mom was an artist as well. That she doesn't like make art like with her hands, but she appropriates things and uses video and text, combines them. And she did performance back in the day. So I grew up in an art environment where I was definitely encouraged to make art, and as the kid in class that can draw well, you're rewarded for that. And I just kept doing it. And I think I came and went with making comics for a while. But then when I got to high school, I found like a like-minded group, including Dean Haspiel and a bunch of other folks. And I just was like, this is my destiny, It's either going to be this or Major League Baseball. And I failed Little League, so that was... That was pretty much the end of that.
We all have that vision. That, if I just get a little bit, and you realize, no, I'm crappy as a 7-year-old.
Right,
Those kids are,
exactly.
That reminds me, I don't know if you read it, when David Foster Wallace wrote about tennis, because apparently he was, in his youth, he could compete.
Okay.
And then discovered at about 15 or so that the natural talent does not get you that far.
Right,
it's the kids who are doing this for 3 hours before the school day starts.
With like private coaches and all that stuff.
And they were placing, just the ball on like a dime in the corner of the court. It's like, yeah, I can't just chase down and catch up with these things anymore because they know what they're doing, and I'm just running around like a madman trying to get to these things. So physically, there are things we can't do. It's good to recognize that early. I was a fat kid growing up, so I
would never know that.
It was my bar mitzvah year in Israel for 6 weeks. I ended up losing like 15 pounds and growing 2 inches over the span of 6 weeks. And that's where it sort of started. I've still fluctuated up and down since then, but now I'm just focused on...
When you came back to the States, kids must have been like, barely even recognized you.
They still humiliated me all the time. I was that
That's
kid.
just part of being
They
that
just
age.
knew I was
13,
an outsider. They got the Gil doesn't fit here. Let's,
It's really stick the knife in.
Yeah, but nowadays I just do can I look better than the cartoonists I'm around? And that's, it's not a high bar to go, but
not at all.
It was a thing. It was an SPX 20-something years ago. I was here, 1998.
I was here. I was at that show.
It was the one that was in the other location. You used to have a baseball game or something, or a softball game.
Yeah, there was a softball game. I played in that game against Diamond.
Oh, yeah? Because I was there with Tom Spurgeon, and there was a cartoonist who I won't name because we're actually pals now, who I wrote a mean review of in a capsule review in the Comics Journal.
Okay.
And we were introduced at this thing. He said, "Oh, you're Gil Roth."
Oh, no.
And I was somewhat worried. And then Tom said to me, "Gil, honestly, this is comics. You could take any of these people in a fight, except for Mac White," he said, from Texas. 'Cause Mac's always got a knife on him, so you have to watch for him.
Do that,
But he said, anybody else in comics you could take, But that's, again, nowadays I can go down there and just, try to make sure I'm in better shape than most everybody.
Yeah, it's a very low bar.
I figure. But
I'm just speaking for myself.
Oh yeah, no. I try to be charitable, but it's one of those like, well, you guys are actually drawing comics. I'm exercising in the morning and nervously burning off calories all day with my day job. But it's me and my thing. The thing I wanted to ask though, we were talking about the reporting versus nonfiction.
Yeah,
I've seen a bunch of your pieces, and you've collected a few. That are done for newspapers in different cities, like Chicago Sun-Times had the healthcare piece and a few others. While they're big topics, they're also region specific in some ways. Like they have a sense of this is Chicago's thing.
Yeah.
That sense of being part of the city that you're writing about or making a comic about. How much research goes into the overarching thing you're trying to tell, and how much goes into just the locality and making sure this is something that's relevant for the region. I think like of Jess Rulifson doing the ER
those are amazing,
or ICU strips with her husband. But those are very those are local and Boston specific. Anyway, talk about research and talk about making a piece that feels right for the local reader.
Well, most of the pieces I think you're talking about are pieces that I've done for the Journalist Resource, which is this journalism organization that's based at the Shorenstein Center.
Okay, so I'm projecting then. Okay, never mind. Sorry, go on.
But the editor there often, in consultation with me, we decide on a topic, and then I usually do like a sort of a deep dive into that topic. And a lot of them have been in graphic medicine. Yeah. So like about COVID and the myth of Black immunity was one. And then I think one of the pieces you're talking about that I did recently had to do with a consortium of Chicago area churches and Rush Medical Center. So in those cases, I really just try to talk, I find the people who are going to be the main sources, which usually are like healthcare providers or people who work with the community there. And I do like some intensive interviews with them. And I did live in Chicago for 4 years, so I have some sense of what that area is like. And I try to pick up on local dialect stuff or various references to things to kind of give it an authenticity. But I don't know if that's like my main...
Not a main thing, but just something that again, a subtle thing about your comics that don't feel like it's a syndicated info dump sort of thing where they actually
say that. Yeah.
Feel like they're part of the place that they're publishing.
I mean, I think a big part of of being a journalist, and certainly a comics journalist, is when you talk to somebody and they have a real personality that comes through, you want to capture that as much as you can, you know, whether it be the way they speak or dress or certain mannerisms or body language. Like, I'm obviously, like, my radar is up for that kind of stuff, and I'm always thinking, okay, I'm going to get that into this somehow, you know. So if those are the little things that combined with the rest of the story and the art and everything kind of make the reader feel connected, or like this is an earnest or honest portrayal of somebody from that place, then that my job is done, you know.
I will say, as an aside, I was reading that Empathy 101. I was reading it online, so I was scrolling by, and without reading the caption, knew it was Creota Wilberg.
Awesome.
Just from the drawing, I was like, "That's clearly Creota." Okay, yes, it is Creota. He's referring to a piece on graphic medicine. Okay, because you just capture in a cartooning way. You know, you got to subtly the angles of her face, the hair, and everything was just somebody I've recorded with a couple of times and been become friends with.
Creota's awesome.
I was really happy to just have it. Oh, good.
I had known her over the years, and her husband Bob Sikoriak, and they're great people, and I crossed paths with them in many ways, and I'd seen Creota do a presentation, you know, of some of her own comics, and so when the opportunity came to do this piece on this graphic medicine piece on graphic medicine, well, the Empathy 101 part of it deals with graphic medicine. I was like, oh, I got to talk to Creota, you know, so it was great too, and she of course was eager to share her wisdom and all that stuff.
It's another Small Press Expo story. Bob was the first cartoonist I ever recorded with for the show. We met at SPX, so this would have been, I guess, 2012. And Tom Spurgeon had called me. I was up in my room, saying, oh, come on down. We're all hanging out at the bar. Get down to the table. And it's a table of basically Mount Olympus. It's like the Hernandez brothers, Klaus, Bag, and all these guys. And I'm just terrified. I am just hiding behind Eric Reynolds. Like, maybe they're not going to see me and know that I shouldn't be here. And then this guy sits down next to me and says, hey, what's your name? I'm Bob. And I was like, I'm Gil Roth. And what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm Bob Sikoriak. I'm like, oh my God, yeah, no, Masterpiece Comics. I love your stuff. Bazooka, Dante Bazooka Joe strips are one of my favorites. And we just became pals from there and recorded with him a few months later. But a year after that, it was perfectly fine. I was shit talking with Bag and all these other people at SPX, and everything was good. But that first time, I was like, oh my God, this is Mount Rushmore of cartoonists, and I'm just some schlub from New Jersey trying to you know.
No, I have very similar stories of Sikoriak being so friendly and welcoming and bringing me in and treating me just like one of the gang when I was just a little piker of a cartoonist. Him and James Sturm are two people who really, I don't know if they do this for everybody, but I know personally I felt like so grateful that these name cartoonists who I admired, you know, and were part of that pantheon, like you were talking about, just
turned out to be good people.
Turned out to be more than good people. Like made an effort to welcome me and make me feel one.
I talked about this with the guest I had just recorded with, because she went through something similar when she was just starting out in cartooning, reaching out to cartoonists who were her heroes, and being still amazed that they actually gave her the time of day and said, send your stuff.
As bad as people say, us cartoonists.
The thing was, and I didn't liken it to that, but I'll bring it up with you because we have a semi-sports connection also. All of those guys, Chris Ware and all these people, they were all in that boat.
Exactly.
None of them were lauded as, oh, you are the next great cartoonist. Everybody had to come up, and they all had someone they idolized and wanted to reach out to. What I liken it to is when Michael Jordan was a minor league baseball player.
Oh, yes. Because I was in Chicago during that period.
And apparently he stayed pals with guys on the Birmingham Barons a lot longer than he did with the Chicago Bulls. Because when you're in the minor league baseball system, you are going to these crappy hotels and sitting on buses with guys for hours on end, and apparently built up a good friendship through that stuff that he didn't exactly have with the Chicago Bulls guys, where things are more...
also he was on much more level playing field with those guys.
He was worse than those guys.
Exactly. It changes your perspective, for sure.
He can't hit a curveball, and a few of them actually could. The other funny story about... there was that Sports Illustrated cover where the ball's like 2 feet under the bat.
That was so unfair.
But there was a story when he was with them, when he was with the Birmingham team, they were in a hotel, and the guys were wiggling like the cable in the back of the TV to get HBO without paying for it. And Jordan was like, guys, I'm Michael Jordan. I can pay for it. They're like, that's not the point. We're going to get it free. Right. We're not going to get it. And that was moments like that. He's like, well, okay, I have solidarity. Let's go with the guys. But yeah, that sense of reaching out to your heroes and seeing guys who are, it raises the question, since we're at SPX, anybody here this year that you haven't met or you're really dying to see among comics pals?
Good question. I kind of joined the bandwagon of SPX 2025 a little late in the game. Like I wasn't planning on going until just a few weeks ago. So I wasn't in the mindset of even, and I've been
knowing who's exhibiting or who's a guest.
Yeah. I mean, there's some folks here who I'm really excited to see because I haven't seen in a long time, like Tom Devlin and Jordan Crane. And, I love seeing, the old crew that I used to come all the time with, including Dean, but like Nick Bertozzi and Jason Little. And
after driving down here with Dean, I'm sure you've had enough of him by now.
Oh, yeah. If I could quit Dean, I can't quit him. It's like
it was one of my questions. How do you put up with Dean Haspiel all these years? But
I just can't. He keeps bringing me back in.
Again, he's roped me into making a 2-page comic. I don't make comics, but somehow this guy, no, Gil, you have to do this.
You're doing it. I one of the things I love about SPX traditionally is getting a chance to walk around and see people who I've never seen before and see their work. Yeah. So, but one person I always am excited to see of late is Caroline Cash. Because her stuff, do you know her stuff?
No, I don't.
Pee Pee Poo Poo is the name of her.
Okay, I've heard of it. So
she is the best. I love her stuff so much. She captures the spirit of that 90s indie comics world like
it was
better than anybody.
I know people always talk about golden ages.
Yeah.
It was a golden age.
It really was.
We had all those guys putting out monthly comics or quarterly. And, God, we were spoiled.
I didn't realize it at the time.
Now everybody's old and broken down. So I'm glad somebody's keeping up the tradition a little bit.
And she lived in Chicago as well, so it's even more part of that. But I always look forward to her stuff, and I hope she has something new that I can pick up.
Speaking of new, what are you working on?
Well, what am I working on? I have a piece
that
that is going to be in Doug and Dean's anthology as well, which I'm pretty excited about. It has to do.
Did you find a dead guy? I found a dead guy.
Yeah, that's what's going on. You win.
But you have to figure out how to draw him. That's the problem.
Yeah, exactly. But it sounds like you found a good solution. Yeah. So I have a piece in that, which I think is very appropriate for the topic of Only in New York. And it has to do, just as a teaser, it has to do with the neighborhood I live in Brooklyn, which is very near the Chabad Lubavitcher sect of missionary Jews who go around trying to find...
with the mitzvah tank?
With the mitzvah tanks.
I always feel bad when they look at me and say, "You're Jewish, get on board." I'm like, yes, how did you figure it out? But
well, that's basically what my piece is about being ethnically profiled by other Jews and how I don't appreciate that. And it brings up a lot of weird associations for me. So I try to, it's fun because it's an autobio piece, which I haven't done in quite a while. I try to walk a line between, love and hate, shall we say?
Yeah. I'm not quite anti-Semitic, but let's find a way to tell the story
so
without...
Let's just stipulate that. Yeah. I am 100% Jewish.
Apparently we're not allowed to... We're not the ones who decide that anymore, so... I know. We won't get into it.
Let's not get into it. But I've been doing a fair amount of comics journalism pieces, so I recently published a thing about a group called Every Campus a Refuge, which is about college campuses and recent immigrants, to refugees in particular, who are housed on college campuses. That was published in the Boston Globe. And I recently did a piece for a music magazine about another 20th anniversary of Katrina piece about a clarinetist named Dr. Michael White and his journey of recovery after Katrina, which included losing this huge library, museum worth of memorabilia related to New Orleans jazz, and sort of how he's reinvented himself. And it was a cool piece. It was like a conversation too. So it was kind of like a weird amalgam of journalism and autobio, which was really fun to do.
There's moments in AD where you show
Right,
up
where I show
interviewing
up.
with the
Yeah.
headset on
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
that.
yeah.
It's one of those
I had
not
to do
distancing
that.
tools, but it does show that there's a person,
Right.
getting
Yeah.
the story.
I was channeling Joe Sacco a little bit there, I guess.
Yeah.
Except I had actual eyeballs and not just
the huge protruding glows.
And I've got a new piece in the works for Journalist Resource as well, which may have to do with AI and medicine, which could be really interesting. Again, I always look forward to these pieces because I work closely with the editor, but it's usually on a topic that I really don't know much about.
Yeah, the
and then I
learning
get
has
to
got to be
discover
fantastic.
it. Yeah.
But tell me about the storytelling conventions of that, as opposed to like an autobio story where you can show everything in front of you. The need to convey information in a different sort of way than you're conveying story. Because too often it can just be a head and, just a
and
huge
unfortunately,
word
I
volume.
do fall back on that more than I like.
Well, you have to at times.
Sometimes
but,
I just have to. And I like to think that I'm good with facial expressions so that I kind of feel like, a big part of that job, if it is just a talking head, is sort of finding just the right combination of lines around the mouth and directions of the eyebrows and maybe a little forehead wrinkle, that sort of really gets to the poignancy of that moment or whatever it is that I'm trying to, convey there. But yeah, I think, AD really, for me as a comics journalist, was the sweet spot because so much of it could be told purely through the action and dialogue, as I was talking about. And all too often, the frustration of being a comics journalist is that there needs to be a lot of narration or explanatory text. And it's when I can find ways to, as much as possible, use the pictures to tell that story, even if it's taking a graph and making it more visually interesting, and somehow a little more comic-y, when I can. I always prefer to have a person telling me something than an explanatory caption because it feels more like it's happening at this moment as opposed to sort of retrospectively. So there's sort of like a hierarchy of things that I look for. First is that moment that can be told in scene with as little explanation as possible and just through action. If there's some dialogue that can also come in as well, that's fine. But both of those are preferable to me as the narrator sort of telling you something and then just having a picture that kind of reinforces it or maybe adds a little wrinkle to it.
Or doing the Chris Claremont thing with the X-Men where it was a giant caption, a little tiny figure underneath.
Yeah. But why did I love those so much?
We adore the Tom Orzechowski's lettering was
exactly.
great.
Tom Orzechowski, come on, it's beautiful.
Yeah, there are those moments when I was a 9-year-old X-Men reader where it was I don't understand why the lettering is different here than here on the page. And you realize afterwards, they needed somebody at the last minute to fill
something in. Yeah.
But you could
really tell the difference.
Yeah. Orzechowski's lettering was just
beautiful.
Another level.
Absolutely.
So working on a number of individual pieces like this, no big long form project in the works that you're considering?
There is a long form project I'm working on, but I don't really know what its status is. And so I probably shouldn't talk too much about it, but it was something I was interested in and continue to be interested in. It's just a question of whether there seems to be some
issues. Just leave it at issues and don't say another word. The big question that I forgot to tell you was coming. What have you been reading?
Comics wise?
Books, comics, whatever.
Okay. So the last graphic novel I read, I was so happy to read. Spent by Alison Bechdel.
I heard it's great. I haven't read it yet.
Oh my God. So much fun. It is just such a hoot, and it which is not what you expect to say when someone's talking about Alison Bechdel. But if you have known her work as long as I have, going back to Dykes to Watch Out For, which I always loved and thought was so funny and so wry, it's that and her autobio stuff mixed together because it's autofiction. So it's her and her wife, Holly Taylor, and their life in Vermont, and then it's her characters from Dykes to Watch Out For who are now her friends. Yeah. And there's no mention of the fact that she created them. Yeah. And there's just all this hilarious stuff about local, current politics, rural versus urban life, what it's like to have a work of yours adapted into another media, which has happened with Fun Home for her, but here it's something a little bit different. I don't want to spoil anything.
I've got to give it a read at some point.
Oh, it's so much fun. And it's done kind of like in the old Tintin magazine style, where there's like a joke on the page turn, every page spread. Much fun.
I always give Pete Bagg credit for that with the biographies that he's done, because every one of them works as a single page unit.
Yes.
And he's getting the whole story across. He always gives you something.
True, you're right. I don't
think
I noticed that as explicitly, but yes, you're absolutely right. Yeah, so she's really got that down, and it's also like, this is more than I could comprehend, but I guess it's also like an analog to Marx's Das Kapital. Like,
sure.
So, like every chapter, I think
corresponds to something
corresponds
from there.
To a chapter in that book as well. And it's definitely about like our modern economy and what it's like to try to be an artist, and all the struggles and selling your soul versus being authentic. And
you could say being a lobbyist for the pharmaceutical industry. That's fine.
That's exactly. I think you can understand. But yeah, it's such a pleasure, and it was color. It's in full color, and it's just like, I love Fun Home. It's one of my top 10 books probably, but it's also nice to see her exercising that other side of
getting
her,
lighter and being able to
absolutely, and still saying lots of like really interesting and relevant things. There's a lot that's said in that book. And
prose or
so prose. Weirdly, I'm reading now, like 20 years after it came out, Junot Diaz's The Brief and Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. And wow, I'd never read it before, and I'm really appreciating it.
The idea that he didn't actually cite the Hernandez brothers explicitly at any point in the opening's got like a Jack Kirby.
No, he does though mention the Hernandez brothers in the book.
I can't recall, because I thought it was years later when he has Jaime doing illustrations for the book and all that stuff, that it was more copying to the influence of Beto and Jaime on that.
No, I'm pretty sure.
Okay, I have to go back and
I'm actually listening to the audiobook version of it,
cool.
And it's a great read by Jonathan Davies, who usually does Star Wars books, but is so good. Anyway, I pretty sure that
I have
he said
to go back and check, because it was one of those things I was getting indignant with. But these are
well, there are lots of little
characters that are in there.
Sidebar notes and footnotes and things. Maybe one of those got lost in the shuffle or something.
Yeah, and again, I can read a little too fast for my own good, as especially in the podcast era where I have way too many books to read, just to make sure that my guests feel like I actually have some idea what they're talking about. But I will let you get back to SPX. I'm glad you had a good time with the Washington tour earlier today. Also getting to see Dean.
It was a privilege for me, because Dean had never actually been on the Washington Mall before, or been to the Lincoln Memorial or the Washington Monument or the Capitol Building. So I got to be that one who kind of walked around. I feel like it was. You should ask him, but I think it was
a
pretty
big field trip
for him.
Thing for us, like 7th grade, maybe 8th grade.
I thought everybody had to come down here somehow.
We're local enough,
Exactly.
As I said, my GPS got me down here in about 4 hours and 15 minutes. So But so I'm glad you taught him what it means to be an American.
Exactly.
Wrong time, but still, it's
very wrong time.
But man, thanks so much for coming on the show. I'm not glad it's been 20 years since Katrina, but I'm glad you managed to capture the human aspects of this.
Thank you so much.
Getting down there. I mean, you mentioned Johnny White's bar, but they were the bar that stayed open the entire storm.
Yes.
When Amy and I were down in the quarter 6 weeks after, we saw it at a distance. Oh, let's go in there and get a beer because we'll honor them for staying open. We took one step inside that place, and the smell drove us back. And you realize, that's what happens when you stay open for 6 weeks in August and September during a hurricane. Yeah, we appreciate everything you did, but we
across the street.
Yeah, we're just gonna leave now. But there's so many aspects and things that brought my experience back, and from some of the follow-up stuff in the zine, especially the everything that went into trying to rebuild afterwards, as the city is still something in flux.
100,000 fewer people than in 2005.
It's
that's crazy.
It's just nuts. But I'm very thankful you made the book you made. I'm glad we were able to celebrate the anniversary, by proxy of, of the book, too. And I hope you have a great SPX. And,
Thank you. You too.
I am looking forward to sitting down with you again. So, whatever the issues are, we'll get another book out of you, I'm sure.
All right. Well, let's hope so. From your lips to God's ears. Is that how it goes?
Yeah, I think that's how we say it. And that was Josh Neufeld. Visit his site, joshcomics.com, to check out more of his books and comics, illustration work, appearances, interviews, all that stuff. And that is joshcomics.com. If you haven't read A.D., New Orleans After the Deluge, go get that now. It's from Pantheon. I hope we got across how good and how important that book is and what it means to bring these stories to the public. Josh goes deep with his interview subjects in that one, and we really see and experience how harrowing that all was. And maybe it serves as a cautionary note for what we potentially could face when catastrophes hit America in future and elsewhere, of course. So go get that one and order Beyond AD, the new zine from Josh that commemorates the 20th anniversary of the storm and provides a lot of follow-up and context to AD itself. Now, Josh isn't too active on social media, near as I can tell, but I follow him on Instagram and Blue Sky at Josh Neufeld. He's also on Facebook at pages.joshneufeld, and Neufeld is Neufeld. I'll have links to all of this stuff in the show and episode notes for this one. Also, the irony, as I mentioned in last week's conversation with Dean Haspiel, is that when it came to that 2-page comic that I did, I showed Eddie Campbell the 2 pages by PDF, and he sent over a ton of notes, but also went into the PDF digitally and fixed a whole bunch of panels. So now I need to do that, resubmit it, and Dean and Doug will be happier with this new edition. Anyway, thanks yet again to Dean Haspiel for nudging me to get together with Josh during SPX. This was a lot of fun. Thanks for listening to the Virtual Memories Show. You can support this podcast by telling other people about it. There's no better way to build an audience than through word of mouth. Also, visit Apple's podcast page for us and leave a rating and review. Every little bit helps, You can also support the show by telling me what you like and don't like about it and who you'd like to hear me record with, or what movie or TV show or book or piece of music or comic or theater or art exhibition or whatever you think I should turn listeners on to. And you can do that by sending me a postcard, letter, email, DM if we're connected on Instagram or Blue Sky, or by leaving a message on my Google Voice number, which is 973-869-9659. Messages can be up to 3 minutes long. It'll cut you off after that, so call back and leave another message if you do. And let me know if it would be okay to include your message in an upcoming episode of the show. You might have something interesting to share with our listeners, but I'd never run someone's message without their permission, so let me know. Now, if you've got money to spare, I appreciate it, but don't give it to me. I've got a day job that pays the bills. You should give to individuals and institutions in need. You can find people through GoFundMe, Patreon, Kickstarter, Crowdfunder, Indiegogo, all those crowdfunding platforms, where you'll find people who really need help just trying to make ends meet or get an artistic project going, covering medical bills or car payments or veterinary bills, and just a few dollars from you might make a real difference in their lives. Now, when it comes to institutions, I give to my local food bank and World Central Kitchen every month, but there are a lot of other things you can give to. The Poor People's Campaign, Freedom Funds, Election Funds, Planned Parenthood, and Women's Choice. There's a lot of things you can do with your money to try to help build a better world, so I hope you'll give. Now, our music for this episode is Fella by Hal Mayforth, used with permission from the artist. You can visit my archives at vmspod.com to check out my 2018 conversation with Hal, where you can learn more about his art, his music, and more. And you can follow Hal on SoundCloud at soundcloud.com/Mayforth. That's MAY, the number 4, TH. And that's it for this week's episode. Thank you so much for listening. I'll be back next week with another great conversation. You can subscribe to the Virtual Memories Show and download all our past episodes at Apple Podcasts and other podcast sources. You can find all my episodes and sign up for the Virtual Memories Show newsletter at vmspod.com. And I'm also on Blue Sky and Instagram and YouTube as vmspod. You've been listening to the Virtual Memories Show. I'm your host, Gil Roth. Keep reading, keep making art, and keep the conversation going.